Hey, hello my friends, this is Maltana, nice to see you again. And what I've prepared for you today is this 3D growing vines tutorial, which you probably know already from Andrew Kramer's site, videocopilot.net, and this is what I'm referring to. But if you've seen this, you then already know that he built this using a 3D application and 3D Studio Max to be specific, I think. Yeah, it says it right here. This tutorial uses 3D Studio Max and After Effects. Well, and as Andrew said, this cannot be done in just After Effects. So this is basically the reason why I am recording this, because if you've watched my videos, if you've watched my tutorials, then you already know that I wouldn't let that kind of challenge just go away. So I took it, and what you see is done in just After Effects. It's pure After Effects. At the beginning I was planning to do the growing vines only, to show just the technique of doing the growing vines, but it turned out to be quite easy and straightforward, so I ended up doing this whole thing. Well, it's recreated very roughly, but it will give you some ideas. So let's just start. Okay, so let me just delete all the unnecessary stuff in here. Let's leave the room in. We don't want to make, we don't want to waste time on doing the room. So yeah, I guess that's it. Let me just show you why I didn't get rid of the room, because this is pretty straightforward thing. There are many tutorials on doing a room, and let me just show you how this works. When we put the camera in, we can then easily orbit the camera around, or just zoom in, zoom out, whatever. And there's actually a cool thing. Let me just get rid of the camera, not to just not to confuse. If we create a new comp, let me do it in 640 by 320 maybe, and if we put the room in and we put the camera in like so, and we collapse transformations on the room, then we can again use the camera tool, and we only have one layer, and you can just go into the room and make changes, and it will change in all the compositions that are using this this particular pre-comp. So this is a pretty easy way to do advanced 3D camera movements with 3D objects, complex objects. So okay, but never mind that. Let me just get rid of this, and I just wanted to point out that what Andrew did is actually a good approach. Of course, it's in this case, at least in this case, because the vines he did are rendering pretty fast, and I think it's actually a better way to do this kind of animations. But it's not, it's not a good approach in all cases. I, for example, like to stay in one application for as long as I can, but in this case I would also do it in 3D Studio Max. But just to show you that it is also possible to do just in After Effects, I decided to record this tutorial, because maybe you will adapt this to some cool graphics that do not require using 3D Studio Max or whatever. Okay, so let's get right to it. Let's create a new comp that is going to be our final comp, so let's call it final. And what else? Let me think for a second. Yeah, first of all, we need to do the shape of the vines. So let's create a new comp. Let's make it like maybe 200 by 200. Yeah, that's about right. And let me turn on the transparency grid here and move the resolution to full, and create a new solid. And our solid is going to be our vines shape. So let's create the shape now. Let's go to the effects palette, type in circle, and by the way, I think I will do a whole separate tutorial on this circle effect, which is pretty straightforward, but it gives so many possibilities. I use it all the time, and I think it's a good thing to share all the things that are possible to do with this simple circle effect. Okay, so let's create a first circle, and let's do it like this. And instead of creating new layers with new circles, we are actually going to duplicate this circle in here and change the transfer mode, or the blending mode, sorry, to normal. And this way we can just have one layer with a bunch of circles on it. And that's the way I do it most of the time if I'm using multiple circles. Not as a rule, but you know, I just like to keep things tidy. I don't like having a bunch of layers sitting around because they are, you know, confusing, hard to maintain, and so on and so forth. And okay, so let's create another one and another one. Control D for duplicating the effect, just as duplicating the layer, and Control D again and move it here a little bigger, and Control D, move it in here a little smaller, like so, and maybe just two or three, like so, and the last one a little bit bigger, and here maybe just a little bit smaller, like so. Okay, so this is going to be our shape that we're going to duplicate or extrude along the path, just like we would do in a 3D application. So let's move to our final comp and let's bring our vine shape, let's call this shape, let's bring this in, and we can turn the visibility off because we are not going to need it. Sounds confusing, I guess, but just bear with me for a second. We'll create a new solid, and what we're going to apply is a effect, and it's actually a plugin. I know that you probably thought that I'm going to do it without plugins because that's what I usually do, but I also promised you some particular tutorials and generally trapcode tutorials, so this is it. We're going to use particular. And you could probably achieve the same effect, well, I know you could, using one of the built-in particle systems, but there are some disadvantages. You know, all techniques has some cool stuff in it and some pretty nasty stuff in it that you don't want to have. So I'll stick with particular because that's really the best thing, the best particular system there is for After Effects. So let's call this vines. And what we're going to do, right now at the default settings, the particular is emitting particles from the center. They just burst out like this, and we're going to change the default settings to something more sophisticated. But instead of doing it with the vines, we're first going to do it with basic shaped particles, so you could maybe see better what's going on. So let's get right to it. What we need is those particles to go along a path. Unfortunately, creating, you know, a mask or a shape with a pen tool does not work with particular. But on the other hand, that's pretty good because you cannot distribute a path in 3D using a pen tool. But what you can do is you actually move a 3D layer along a path, just changing a position, and this creates a nice path distributed along a 3D space. So Peter, who made the particular, thought about it. He's a really thoughtful guy. He thought about virtually everything that could be useful, and he designed particular to work with lights. So we are going to create a new motion path 1, which is going to be a point light, and if you're going to use this technique, you need to name your lights like that: motion path 1, motion path 2, and so on and so on. So let's create a light, and what we're going to do now, we're going to animate the position of the light. So let's just get right to it. Let me move to the top view maybe, so we could just see it a little bit better. Let me just place the light somewhere in here, like so, and let's press P for position and animate the position. So like a few frames forward. It doesn't really matter how we're going, how the keyframes are going to be distributed, because we're going to use roving keyframes anyway on them. So like this and like this, and maybe like this. And we've got those cool handles in here, so we can just change the curvature of the path like so. I think this one is pretty good, and yeah, I guess that's it. And now let's move to the left view, so we can change the position in Z on, in Y, on the Y axis, like this and like this, and actually maybe something like this, so it goes up like it did in the original tutorial. So let's do it like this. Yeah, that's nice. Okay, I think that's cool. And now we're going to use roving keyframes, rove across time. What this does, it basically measures how fast the object should go between each keyframe to maintain its speed. When I turn it off, you see that the density of the dots, which indicate the position on the in the interpolated frames, is getting wider in here, and it's closer in here, which means on this path it goes slower, and here it goes much faster. So when I do rove across time, it's going to use the constant speed all the way. So this is exactly what we want. And now we can just stretch it out, and I think that 10 seconds is just about right. So basically this is our motion path that we're going to use as our extrusion path, and from the camera view it looks something like this, which I think is exactly what we need. Okay, so right now let's move back to our particular layer. We can turn off the motion path for now, and let's go to the emitter, and let's set the velocity of the particles to 0 and velocity from motion to 0 as well. And I think we can set all the velocity values to 0, really. And right now all the particles stick in one place. So let me just show you how will they look if we go to physics and set the mode to air, which is default, and then set the motion path to motion path 1. And right now we've got a very cool 3D stroke, which is also a good way to you probably know the 3D stroke from Trapcode, but this doesn't allow you to actually shape the stroke the way you like. You just draw it on a 2D plane and then just wrap it around or something like that. And if you want to create a 3D stroke in a certain shape, then you could easily use particular to do that. Why it doesn't go any further? Probably because the life of the particles is set to 3, because that's the default. Yes. So let's set it to 30. That's the length of our comp, and yeah, this is it. Pretty cool. And let me just put the camera in so you can see that this is a 3D. Yeah, pretty cool. Pretty damn cool. Okay, let's get rid of the camera for now. And what we actually want to do, I think, is we want to move the emitter point, which is from where the particles are emitted, to the initial position of the light. Because right now when I move this, the whole thing moves. The shape is maintained, but the position from which the particles are emitting is changed. So let's just put it in the exact same place that the motion path is in, and we can do it in two ways. We can just simply copy the position to all the values. So in here we go 306.7 and 325.3 and negative 462.2, which is of course a good approach. But you know me, I'm an expression junkie, so I'm going to show you a cool expression that will always update these values once you change the path. Because right now, if you change the path, you would have to just copy and retype the values again. So let's just do a cool simple expression. So let's go to the vines and to the particle, to the emitter. The position for x and y and z are separated, as you see, so we are going to use the same expression on both those parameters. So let's just show our motion path in here, and alt click on the stopwatch, and let's type light, which is going to be our variable to hold the this motion path light. What we need to do is we need to take the values from the light's position from the beginning of the comp, and to be more specific, from the first frame. And this is also two ways of doing this expression. We can use value at time, which I introduced in the CG Snake tutorial, if I remember correctly, and then just type in 0, because value at time works with seconds, and 0 seconds is basically the first frame of the comp. But we could also use an expression to check what is the first keyframe and what's its value. But to simplify things, we're just going to use value at time in this case. So let's create a new variable, call it x, and what x is actually light dot transform parameters dot position. So it basically says we're going to use the position of the light, and now in the square brackets we are pointing to the first parameter, which is indexed at 0, and the first parameter is actually this value. So that's it. Now let's do the same thing for y. Light transform position 1. And now we have to tell After Effects to use these values like this, and there we go. Pretty cool. And now we're going to use the same expression to drive the z parameter. So let me just paste them in, and instead of doing it like that, we can just simply say light transform and point to the third parameter, which is the z, and that's it. Oh, of course, I made a mistake. I was talking about value at time and blah blah blah, but unfortunately I forgot to put that one in, and once the position of the light changes, the emitter position changes as well, so it doesn't look quite right, but we can easily fix that. So let's just add value at time, and we type in 0 as the time from which we are taking the value, and then 0. So we basically have to add value at time 0, and the same thing here, value at time. Okay, let's see how that works. Okay, that looks pretty cool. So we've got our basic setup finished. So what we need to do now is we need to change this simple line into our vines. So let's do that right now. We already have our shape in here, so we're just going to tell particular to use that instead of a sphere. So let's go to the particle type, and check and go to the custom, and it's going to ask us which layer to use, and we're going to use the shape layer that we've pre-made as a pre-comp. And as you see, the it already takes effect. Let me just show you. Move to the full resolution, that's right, but it doesn't look quite right yet. So let's just increase the size to maybe 10 or something. Okay, it starts to look a little bit better. But what about this twisting that Andrew did in 3D Studio Max? We can do the same thing in here and simply set the rotation speed to a value of I'm guessing 0.5 maybe, maybe a little bit more, 0.6. Yeah, that's cool. Let's see how that looks. Let's render this out. And there's one thing to remember. Since those are particles and not a 3D extruded shape, we get this dots in here, which is basically, the position in which the particles are emitted. So to get rid of that, we can actually try to emit more particles, or just extend the time in which the light travels on the path. This is of course the downside of this technique, but on the other hand, you can just create a pre-comp out of this and then use timer mapping in the final composition. So there's always a workaround to a workaround to a workaround. So let's just focus on doing this 3D vines and not on the problems or downsides of this technique. So okay, we've got this so far. So far so good. And let's try to tweak it up a little bit. What is cool in these 3D vines, what makes them cool, is actually those light reflections from the room that they're in, like you saw on the Andrew's site and at the beginning of the tutorial. Unfortunately, particular doesn't really work with lights. I mean, the particles doesn't work with lights unless you turn the 3D switch on, which is not what we want. You're not going to get the lights affect the layer or the particles. So I had to create a workaround around this problem, and I did. You know me, I always do. And it's layer styles. Actually, you can do it in a different way in a CS2 version, but I don't really want to get into that. You'll probably figure that one out. Just use something similar to bevel and emboss and you'll get it right. Let's turn the transparency off for now and change the color to black. It will let us see it better, I think. And let's just see how that looks right now. See, already takes effect. And let's just pick it up a little bit more. Let's change the color to green, like so. Saturated green. And maybe increase the size and softness just a little bit, like so. How does that look? Pretty awesome, I think. Maybe let's just make it a little bit darker, like so. Yeah, that's better, I think. And just to introduce some diversity into this, we can also set the rotation, I mean the angle, to travel along this this shape. And to do that, we are just going to type my favorite expression that I use all the time to this kind of animations, which is time multiplied by a number, usually a high number. Let's use 500 in this case and see how that looks. Okay, that's pretty cool. I think it might be a little too fast. Well, actually it isn't, I think. But you can already see the first problem that we have to face. Once I animated the angle, it travels along the extruded vines, which is maybe exactly what you want in some case, but not in this particular case. So to fix that, we are going to change the time sampling for the particles, for the emitting particles, to start at birth and loop. And I hope this will fix the problem. Yeah, it does. Okay, great. So what else? What else can we do to make it even cooler? I think it's about time to put the 3D room in. So let's do that right now. And maybe let's just move it above the shape and see how that looks. Okay, that's pretty cool. And I think we can put the light in as well, which is going to affect the room. So let's create a new light. It's going to be a point light. That's right. Collapse transformations on the room. That's right. That's right, exactly. Let's maybe saturate the light a little bit more. Light options, maybe just turn the intensity up and make it like a yellowish green, like so. Yeah, that's better. And let's create a black background for this as well, like so. Already looks cool, right? And the camera, let's see how that looks. Okay, so I think it actually looks pretty good, and but we do have some artifacts in here. Let me just zoom in so we can see it better. We've got this nasty ramping effect, which is caused by the fact that there are less frames than there are particles emitted per second, and we can fix that somehow by increasing the length of the comp, of the particle comp, and so on and so forth. But I think there's actually an easier way. Like I said, Peter that designed this wonderful plugin, Peter from Trapcode, is a really thoughtful guy, and he thought this through really well. And what we can do is we can click on the subframe sampling, which is basically going to do time remapping, on the inside of the particle to change the way that particles, which frames are the particles are using. And as you can see, it's already smoothened out, so that's pretty damn cool. So I think we're good, but we need to do some adjustments. And first of all, I think I would like the particles to be a bit thicker. So let's just go to the size and increase it to maybe 20. Oh no, that's way too much. 13 looks okay, I think. But to introduce some diversity, we can also use size over life, which is a pretty cool thing. You can control a few things with those kind of graphs in particular, and to be more specific, you can control the size and opacity, and I think color as well, but you would have to be in a different mode to access the color property. And oh, sorry, not the opacity. Let's apply the preset. You've got all kinds of presets in here. Take a look how this changes across time when I do it like this. And let me just draw something like this, maybe. See how the particles change? This is exactly how this graph works. This is the length of the life of a single particle, and then you can just draw how it's going to look. So let's do it like this, and then we can just smooth it out like so. And no, that actually isn't right. Let's increase it to 18, maybe 20, 25, and right now the values are modified by this graph, so that's why I'm using so high values that weren't working at the beginning. It's pretty hard to draw it like this. Maybe I should use a tablet. I have a tablet in here, my beautiful Wacom tablet. Pretty old, but it's Wacom, right? So it works anyway. Oh yeah, much better, much better. I think I like it a little bit denser. Okay, let's just stick to that. There's no point in wasting more time on this. You can work on this on your own. And let me just put it back. Okay. And what next? I think that we can actually change the path of the light a little bit, just a little bit, because I'd like it to go through here, like so. Come on, come on. Maybe I'll turn off the vines so it speed up the rendering. Okay. Okay, that's good enough. And actually, the last step, I think, is to create this watery reflection. And to do that, we're actually going to go inside the room composition. And why is that? Because I want to create a new solid that will be tall, like maybe 2000 pixels. And of course I will move it into a 3D space. Oh, sorry, wrong switch. 3D space, that's it. And now I will rotate it along the x-axis, like so, and put it somewhere here when I want the water to be. And I think that's good. Maybe let's move it back a little bit, like so. And okay, that's cool. And now we're going to take this solid, cut it, so edit cut. I just did that with a shortcut, and paste it in here. It should have the same position. Yeah, it does, and that's good. No, actually that's wrong. Sorry for that confusement. What size of the comp is this? 640 by 480. Okay, so we're going to create a comp that is 640 by 480, and we're going to put this solid in here, and we're going to use collapse transformations as well. But what we're going to put on this solid is pretty interesting. Let me just extend the length, and we're going to use fractal noise, the most commonly used effect of all times. You can do practically anything with fractal noise. We're going to turn the complexity down to 2 and play with the transform options. Turn off the uniform scaling and increase the width, which is going to create this streaks of lights and shadows, which are going to be our water. We can even make it a little bit denser by decreasing the height, like so. And yeah, that's good. And of course we have to play with the evolution parameter. But to do that, we're not going to use keyframes. No, we're going to use an expression, and one of my favorites, like I said before, time multiplied by a value of whatever you like, whatever makes it look good. Well, 1000 looks a little bit too fast, so let's turn it down to maybe 350. So the water movement is pretty slow, pretty smooth, like so. Yeah, I think that's about right. Okay, so let's call this water, and let's put it into our final comp. Oh, it's taking so long. Because of the vines. Okay, we can turn the vines off for now. And collapse transformations. Oh yeah, that's it. That's it. Very good. And actually, I don't think we're going to use the water itself. We're going to use the water as the source for the displacement map, which we are going to create right now. And let's put it above the room, because we want those reflections to be in here on the room. And let's apply displacement map and choose the water layer to do that. And why doesn't it look good? I have no idea. Let me just play with the settings and maybe I'll figure something out. This should be working. probably because of the collapse transformations. It doesn't always work the way you want it, or the way you thought it's going to work. Yeah. Yeah, we can basically do it like this, I think. But on the other hand, it's going to mess up the thing that I was going to do next. So, forgive me, I have to figure this one out. I probably did something wrong on the way. So yeah, just hold on for a second. Okay, guys, I'm back. I don't really know what I did that it didn't work out for the first time, but I'm pretty sure that all I did was okay. But anyway, let's just try this again. We're going to use the room, and we're going to create a new solid, or actually to be safe that everything's okay, that all dimensions are good, and so on and so forth, we're going to duplicate the ceiling like so, Control D, and just move it down and match it up with the floor. I mean, where the floor should be and where the water is going to be. And let's apply fractal noise and lower the complexity and transform. Turn off uniform scaling. Let's play with the settings like this and like this. Okay, that's good. And I think that's it. And let's play with the evolution. So time times how much we used? 350 last time. I think that's it. And now let's pre-compose this layer. Control Shift C, and let's call this water. And let's remove it from the room. We don't need it in here. Let's go back to the final comp. Let's put the water in like so. Collapse transformations, turn it off, and let's add the adjustment layer, and let's add the displacement map, and of course choose the water layer to do the distortion displacement. And as you can see, it works pretty well. So let's just apply some settings like this, and maybe just a slight displacement like this. This one actually looks pretty good, and we can use the water as well. We can just turn it on and then decrease the opacity like so. And I think this one is going to look pretty cool. And there's actually something more that we can do to this water, and that is the CC drizzle effect, which basically creates water drops on top of a layer. And let's just turn the drip rate down to 0.5 and longevity, whatever that's pronounced like, set it to 2. This is basically a life of a single drizzle, I guess. Yeah, so let's go back to the final comp and see how that looks. Okay, that looks pretty nice, I think. Let's just zoom in so you can see it a little bit better. Yeah, we got those drizzles in here and here. That actually looks pretty good. I'm pretty happy with it. Okay. Okay, guys, so we've got our particles set, and we've got our water set as well. So I think it's about time we do a camera movement, and to do that, you know, let's just turn the render mode to motion preview. This will render a bit faster and turn the resolution down to half. And let's create a new null object, I think. Or you know what, let's just keep it simple. Let's just try to do with a regular camera movement. So position and anchor point, set keyframes, and we can just, you move the camera around like so. Maybe do something like this, and let's see where the particles are coming from. So let's move those keyframes here, and let's apply easy ease. And let's turn on the full render option. Now we can just skip every fourth frame, for example, to see how that looks. And let's do a quick render. Yeah, that's cool. I think that's cool. Okay, so we're pretty much done in here. Well, you can of course tweak it up a little bit. You know, I leave it up to you. It's really just a matter of setting the parameters right to make it look right. But you already know the technique, right? Just create a custom particle basically, and just move it along a path that is defined by the light, and just set particular to use that motion path as the motion path on which the particles travel, and that's basically it. There's one more thing left to do. What we can do is we can make the particles go below the waterline, which is a pretty cool thing. And to do that, we're going to duplicate our vines. Let's call this vines under, and let's turn off the original vines for now, and we need a new 3D layer to do that. So let's create one right now. Sorry, 2000, because it's gotta be as wide as the room, basically. So let's just rotate it like that and set it up with the floor. And right now, for the vines under, we have to set up the obscuration layer to be our obscure layer. So let's do that right now and set it to obscure and turn the obscure layer off. Haha, pretty cool. Pretty cool. But I think we can move it up a little bit. Maybe it's not match up with the water very well, so let's just move it up a little bit. See how that works. Let's set it to 300. That's too much. 350. That's about right. Let's see how that looks with the camera movement. And yeah, that's better, I think. It goes below the water and then above again. Pretty cool. And actually, what we've just created, it's my mistake. Those vines are vines over, and the original ones should be vines under. And what we can do to those vines, we can move them below the water layer and below the adjustment layer, which makes the displacement. And this should somehow change the appearance of the particles. And to increase this effect even more, we can apply a separate displacement map for our vines that go under. Of course, we are using the same water layer again, but here we can use separate parameters to create the displacement, like so. And there's one more thing that we can do. Since the particles are going below the water, we can make them darker. We can make them black, and let's do that right now. Let's choose a black color like so, and let's turn the original vines back on, and I think that turns out to be a pretty nice effect, which is ready for rendering, I think. Yeah, that actually looks pretty good, and I must say it looks even better than I was expecting, because getting this whole parameters right takes a lot of time, matching up with the floor, matching up with the setting the parameters for displacement and everything. It takes a lot of time and play, to get it just right. But the whole technique behind this is pretty simple, and I hope that you get it. Just create a custom particle, create a motion path using a light, then apply a particular, and then use the motion path from the light as the motion path on which the particles travel. And that's basically the whole idea behind this tutorial and behind this technique. Like I said on the beginning, for this particular thing, I think it would be better to actually use a 3D application, but just in case you don't own one or don't have anyone else to do it for you, now you know how to create this effect in After Effects, because this technique actually allows you to create very complex shapes, 3D shapes, like 3D ribbons, or maybe a camera traveling along a road in 3D. Just use your imagination and make good use of this tutorial. I hope you've enjoyed it. This is Maltanan for Maltanan.com, and